Hi, welcome back to the analysis of half caste. We're looking at stanza 3 and hopefully stanza 4, so this should be the last video. Okay, so we get a real tone shift in this last stanza. We've obviously, the main thing that divides both of these stanzas is this one is very imagery driven. He uses 3 distinct metaphors, whether this one is taken almost to the complete other extreme where he uses a literal translation of the language, and I think this tone shift reflects his frustration that turns from humour into anger at the absurdity. So let's see if you notice whether we get this tone shift in this section where things are taken it's a lot more literal. So I won't be using my imagery colour as much. It will be more about the vocabulary that he chooses to use. Okay, so explain yourself what you mean. I'm listening to you with the keen half of my ear. I'm looking at you with the keen half of my eye. And when I'm introduced to you, I'm sure you'll understand why I offer you half a hand. So you can see he's divided himself in half to take the extreme kind of hyperbolic literal view of the term. So I think it's worth us noting those. This is his extreme, like, literal of the phrase. Now it's interesting that he chooses to repeat keen, which reflects that frustration for him. Keen to be interested. I'm keen. I'm really interested to know how you explain this. Okay. So we've got the repetition to show that I'm really interested. I'm listening to you with my, I'm really interested to know how you explain this to me, please. So I think we definitely get that kind of frustration and anger. And I think it's interesting that he's using real body parts now. I can hear you. So when I look at this terminology of I can hear everything you're saying, I can see everything that you're saying, I can feel everything that you're saying, I think it appeals to that sense of, well, it appeals to the senses because they're affecting him, and it hurts. And I think perhaps he's trying to reveal to the reader or the audience that it has an impact. This racist language hurts. It's what it makes me think anyway. So I think we get the use of the senses on purpose. So about like hearing, seeing, feeling the impact of racism. I think it makes it more real. I think that's his point. He wants to say this is affecting real people. I'm a real person. And he's saying, I can hear what you're saying. I can see what you're saying. And even, you get that first and second person on purpose. I'm sure you'll understand. I'm talking to you. It's very personal. We have this direct address. So I is first person, you is second. And then the next part of this stanza talks about night and sleeping. And again, I think he's talking about the fact that we're all the same. So everybody has ears, everyone has eyes. He picks things that everybody has that makes us all unite, that what we have in common. So I might note that actually, what we in common. He picks these things about sleeping, about shadows, about body parts that we all have that unite us. When I sleep at night, I close half an eye. I actually do want to look at this one. I'm going to use my intention colour for this because apart from all the other things that it conjures up about in common and sleeping, to go to sleep like half asleep, it conjures up a feeling of fear. I think the reason I go to that is that that feeling of, is this language and this terminology and that racism causing that fear and that sadness and feeling like you've got to sleep with one eye open. That's the phrase that came to me whenever I read that. That's where I go to. Is it fear? As well as, I think, obviously the meaning that he's definitely going for, which is that he's not half a person, he doesn't dream half a dream, he doesn't half sleep. And we get that in the standard English here. So in contrast to this, to the Caribbean dialect, we've got consequently, look at that developed terminology here, almost like he's proving to us that, look, I'm both, I'm who I want to be, I'm a mixture of everything. Consequently, when I dream, that standard English, that intelligence, professionalism, perhaps, or he's just showing that he has both qualities. So standard English, this, it's, how do I phrase that? So he's got both cultures inside of him. He's got the Caribbean Creole dialect, but he's also got standard English, and people shouldn't judge him based on the language that he uses. I think that's the inferences that go with the fact he's chosen that consequently when I dream. So when I dream half a dream, and when moon begin to glow, I half cast human being. And we've not had much of this, but we do have the alliteration, I half cast human. Sorry, it's sibilance here. Soft sound. Half human, half a shadow. So interesting that he's juxtaposed these two phrases here. Human. I want to draw an arrow to that. Human, we're all human. We've all got that in common. We're all have that at our base. But the fact that this racist term precedes it makes him feel less than, and I think he does that on purpose. This doesn't sit right with him. The sibilance draws that attention. I am human too. I am not less than a human. I am not less than anyone. I shouldn't be in a hierarchy. He uses the image of shadows as well, and if you were looking into that as just a phrase, if you were really zooming in on shadow, we've got that reference to dark, sadness, danger, fear. But then we've also got that light and shadow, like we can see it here, the light and shadow of the weather, the light and shadow colour comes back in, and also a reference to black and white perhaps. So the use of colour is really important throughout, and he draws our attention back to that. And then there's this invitation, which I think is quite nice. So he's definitely more angry here in this stanza, but then there's a request, isn't there, to, you must come back tomorrow. There's this open invitation to change. So he's not just arguing that it's unacceptable and that's it and it's frustrating. He's given us like a way forward. He's given his readers what to do next, and that he's willing to adapt and change if other people are. And I think that links to him. This is why I'm using my intention colour, because that's the purpose of this poet. He wants to promote a better understanding of different cultures and diversity of cultures, and that's where that comes back to. Interesting that he plays on the image from before. Come back and listen with the whole of your eye, the whole of your ear, and the whole of your mind. Now, this is imagery, because this anaphora here, so anaphora is repetition of the beginning, and the imagery is to, what he's saying is, have an open mind, don't prejudge, listen, learn, respect. All of that comes in that end bit here, and then he ends the poem as he began it with 3 really short lines. and he goes back to personalising it. And again, we've had you all the way through, but there's the, for him, I, first person, I will tell you the other half of my story. So I think it's quite interesting that he takes ownership of this phrase. He puts the, he reverses uses that word. How can I phrase that better? So half caste has been used in quite an offensive way, but here he's putting the ownership on the fact that others don't know him or have heard him. So the reason that he might only be half a person to others is because they are prejudiced and being judgmental. So I'm going to put due to prejudice, stereotypes, racism. So it's almost putting the blame back on other people. That word half is not, it's not a part of him, it's other people's fault that they choose to see him as half of something. And there's the personal, like first person, I think is important, which he starts and ends with. I'm not half, you know. He starts here, I'm half as his declarative, and here is the other half of my story. He's not half a person. Again, I'm going to say this as I say at the end of a lot of these videos, these are just my thoughts and the research that I've done, but you can obviously have a look and find loads of other things that you can find about this poem to probably add and enhance or do slightly differently. Inferences is the reader's responsibility. It's how we view it, it's how I viewed it, and it doesn't mean that they're right, and there might be lots of other ways that you can view it and lots of other things that you might pick that I've not found. So please do your research, don't just rely on these videos. In the same view, I do hope you find them useful, and if you do have any questions, please just let me know. Thank you.